Everyone. I have been, since this patch released, desperately trying to make the stun baton a potentially viable build, but as my Reddit post the day before the patch came out kind of mentioned, and I covered a lot of the things that needed to be buffed, and they actually did pretty much everything they changed was something that I had predicted, but they flopped on the stun baton again. I specifically mentioned that the problem with this melee weapon is actually the animation, it's not the damage. Because let's just kind of compare it to its closest relative here, which is the laser dagger. The laser dagger has an extremely reliable melee lunge and punish on the light attack. It is almost impossible to whiff. So you can even weapon swap to it and then do the dagger punch after staggering. It's quick enough for that. As a lower punish weapon, that makes sense. The stun baton, for some reason, has a super slow lunging animation, which even with the Kakaku is often cutting it close. I've been trying with the Flugel, which is pretty darn close in terms of melee thrust, but it is still too slow on the light thrust. They buffed the charge damage, which presumably was to compensate for the fact that the detonation has been nerfed, but this is not addressing the heart of the issue with the stun baton, which is that you can't use the charge attack as a punish. The requirements to set it up are so strict. You basically need to be against an opponent that doesn't recover too quickly, so they can't be reverse joints in some of the later bipeds. You need to be point blank, so it's much more punishing than things like, say, the pile bunker or the double trouble, which have a little bit of wiggle room in order to give you time to get closer to use their punish. It has less damage on the charged attack than a lot of the more risky punishes like the laser slicer. It doesn't have a useful lunge, so like the laser dagger, while it has a great punish and a lunge on the light attack all built into one attack, it then also has a useful charge attack because it has an interrupt on it, like a charging mini slash and burst impact. The stun baton just it's just far too slow. I think it did need the damage anyways, especially given that they're going to nerf the detonation on electrical. But here's the two things that I had recommended. They need to speed up the animation on both lunges. The damage definitely is fine now in the charge attack, but that needs to be sped up. And I feel like the tracking also needs some work, and then actually a third change. So the detonation needs to be linked to, like, time needs to be matched to your opponent's ACS recovery. The one thing that the stun baton has unique over the dagger as a gimmick is that there's a delayed detonation and mini stun. But you don't want this going off during the ACS because then it just counts as a regular damage addition to the punish. We want it to actually do something different, which is to give you a head start on the next stagger. Keep in mind that that already isn't a useful gimmick on its own, because why not just take something like the slicer where you can just outright kill them if you get one stagger, and say they pop their armor, then you weapon swap like my other melee build to the pulse blade or something like that. Like, more damage, especially if it's enough damage to outright kill heavy bipeds in particular, is a huge, like, it's just so hard to compete with that. So the gimmick had better be good. In this case, at least with lightweights, you can re-stagger them the first time after you land that. Hopefully, but I think the one thing that needs to happen is that it needs to be reliable enough that even lightweights can be punished with it. And then when the detonation goes off, it should essentially drain a huge chunk of the pulse armor. But I just want to show some clips now that over even just the last 24 hours, just showing how notoriously unreliable the stun baton is, specifically for its animation. And this is kind of like a plea to FromSoft to please, like, ask the community before you do patch updates, because I've predicted so many of the buffs that took them 2-3 different tries, like, from the outset, and this is one that I've been harping on for a long time. And they just keep messing up the buffs and the tweaks. I'm not sure why. And the community seems to know a lot better than they do in terms of, like, how to adjust their weapons.